Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. What would you do if your neighbor stole your brand new barbecue, flaunted it at parties you weren't invited to, and then sued you for defamation when you confronted them? This is the outrageous tale of betrayal, deceit, and justice as one man fights to reclaim his grill and his reputation in the ultimate neighborhood showdown. David had always been a man of simple pleasures. A young family man with a knack for turning ordinary weekends into cherished memories, he recently fulfilled one of his long-standing dreams, purchasing a top-of-the-line barbecue grill. This wasn't just any grill. It was a premium model with all the bells and whistles. Sleek and stainless steel, it boasted multiple cooking zones, an integrated smoker, and even a rotisserie feature. For David, this wasn't merely a purchase. It was an investment in the joy of hosting, in the laughter of family gatherings, and the irresistible aroma of sizzling steaks wafting through the neighborhood. The first time he fired it up, David felt a surge of pride. His backyard, modest but welcoming, transformed into the neighborhood's new hotspot. Every Saturday, the grill became the centerpiece of warm, sunlit afternoons. Friends and family gathered around picnic tables, their laughter harmonizing with the crackle of the flames. It wasn't just a tool, it was an extension of David's personality, a symbol of his passion for bringing people together. Each week, his skills improved. First, he mastered burgers and hot dogs. Then came slow-cooked ribs that practically fell off the bone and perfectly seared salmon that earned him nods of approval from even the pickiest eaters. A few neighbors began to notice the enticing smells and, at David's invitation, joined in on the fun. Among them was Roger, the friendly but somewhat elusive man who lived a few houses down. Roger had a natural charm and a way of making himself at home in any setting. Though he often accepted David's invitations, he never reciprocated with one of his own. Roger seemed particularly taken with David's new grill, frequently asking questions about its features. "That's a beauty," he'd say, running his hand along its polished surface. "Must have set you back a fair bit." David, always eager to share his enthusiasm, proudly explained the intricacies of his prized possession, oblivious to the glint of curiosity in Roger's eyes. As the weeks went on, David began planning something bigger, a grand neighborhood barbecue. It would be his way of thanking everyone for their warm welcome and showcasing just how far his grilling skills had come. He envisioned string lights hanging from the trees, kids running across the lawn, and neighbors mingling over perfectly grilled kebabs and frosty drinks. The date was set for the end of the month, giving him just enough time to perfect a few more recipes and prepare the backyard for the event. David's excitement was infectious. His wife Sarah helped him plan the menu, while his two young kids eagerly volunteered to help with decorations. "It's going to be the best party ever," his son declared, while his daughter practiced making signs that read, "Welcome neighbors." Meanwhile, David kept up his weekly barbecues, honing his techniques and testing out new marinades. He couldn't wait to share the fruits of his labor with the entire neighborhood. The morning after a delightful family barbecue, David stepped outside, coffee in hand, to tidy up the backyard. The air still carried a faint, smoky aroma from the previous evening's feast, a reminder of the joy that had filled his home. As he scanned the yard, however, a peculiar sight caught his attention, or rather, the absence of one. His beloved barbecue, the gleaming centerpiece of his backyard gatherings, was gone. David blinked, certain he must have overlooked it. Perhaps he had moved it the night before. He checked the patio, the garage, even behind the bushes, but the grill was nowhere to be found. A chill of disbelief crept over him. He stood in the empty spot where the barbecue had sat, a pit forming in his stomach. Who could have taken it? And why? Determined to find answers, David canvassed his property, searching for any signs of forced entry or misplaced equipment. There were no broken locks, no overturned furniture, just an eerie, empty space where his prized possession had once stood. Clutching at straws, he knocked on a few neighbors' doors, hoping someone had seen or heard something unusual during the night. The responses were disheartening. Most neighbors expressed sympathy but admitted they hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary. Some even joked that it might have been a prank. Frustrated but undeterred, David made a call to the local police. The officer he spoke to listened patiently but explained that without evidence or witnesses, there was little they could do. "If you find proof, let us know," the officer said, his tone almost apologetic. Over the next 2 weeks, David became consumed by the mystery. He replayed the events of that evening in his mind, wondering if he had overlooked something critical. His frustration grew with each passing day, as did his suspicion. One detail nagged at him: Roger's sudden change in demeanor. The once chatty neighbor now seemed to avoid David altogether, retreating indoors when their paths crossed. At first, David dismissed it as coincidence, but the thought lingered. Could Roger be involved? The situation took a bizarre turn when, during a casual conversation, a few neighbors mentioned a grand party Roger had recently hosted. "You should have been there, David," one of them said, smiling. "He's got the most amazing barbecue now. You would have loved it." Another neighbor chimed in, raving about the perfectly grilled steaks and juicy ribs. David's heart sank. Roger had never owned a grill before. David was sure of it. A picture began to form in David's mind, one that made his blood boil. Could Roger have taken his barbecue and shamelessly passed it off as his own? The idea seemed ludicrous, yet the timing and details were too coincidental to ignore. Determined to uncover the truth, David began to piece together the fragments of the puzzle. He recalled Roger's curious interest in the grill during past barbecues, his probing questions about its features and maintenance. At the time, David had thought nothing of it, seeing Roger's fascination as harmless. Now it all seemed suspicious. Roger's avoidance, the sudden acquisition of an identical grill, and the neighbors' glowing accounts of Roger's newfound hosting prowess. Everything pointed to one unsettling conclusion. Feeling a mixture of disbelief and anger, David decided to confront Roger. He couldn't let this betrayal go unanswered. The barbecue was not just a grill, it was a symbol of his hard work, his hospitality, and the joy he shared with others. David had had enough. Weeks of stewing over the mysterious disappearance of his barbecue and Roger's suspicious behavior had pushed him to the brink. That morning, clutching the simmering embers of his frustration, he decided to confront Roger directly. There would be no advance notice, no preamble. He wanted answers, and he wanted them now. As David approached Roger's house, he felt his pulse quicken. The sound of laughter and faint music drifted from the backyard. Another gathering, he realized, tightening his jaw. Peeking through the fence slats, he caught a glimpse of the very object that had consumed his thoughts. His barbecue sat proudly in the center of Roger's patio, gleaming as if it had never left David's yard. The sight ignited a flash of rage. Without hesitation, David pushed open the gate and strode into the backyard. Roger, standing by the grill with a pair of tongs in hand, froze mid-motion. The guests, mid-conversation and holding plates of food, turned to look at David with startled expressions. "Roger," David said, his voice strained but controlled. "We need to talk." Roger raised an eyebrow, feigning ignorance. "David, what a surprise. Can I help you with something?" David pointed directly at the grill. "That's my barbecue, Roger. You stole it from my yard." A murmur rippled through the guests as they exchanged puzzled looks. Roger set down the tongs and crossed his arms, adopting an air of calm authority. "Your barbecue? I think you're mistaken. This is mine. I bought it a couple of weeks ago." "Don't lie to me," David snapped. "I know it's mine. I recognize the scuff marks on the lid, the custom thermometer I installed, and the color. You've never even owned a barbecue before." Roger sighed theatrically, as though dealing with a tiresome child. "David, I understand you're upset, but I have proof." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled receipt, waving it for everyone to see. "Here's the proof of purchase. I don't know what's going on with you, but accusing me like this isn't okay." David snatched the receipt and scanned it. The store logo, date, and model seemed legitimate at first glance, but something felt off. Still, without a way to verify it on the spot, David hesitated. The guests took Roger's side immediately. "Maybe you should calm down, David," one of them said cautiously. "It seems like a misunderstanding." "Yeah, accusing someone of theft without proof is serious," another added. David felt the weight of their judgment. His cheeks burned as he looked around, realizing he had no allies in this crowd. Roger smirked faintly, his confidence bolstered by the support of his audience. "David," Roger said with faux sympathy, "maybe you should head home and think things through. I'm sure this will all make sense later." Humiliated and furious, David turned on his heel and left the yard, the sound of murmured conversations and stifled laughter following him. Once home, he paced the living room, muttering to himself, How could Roger stand there and lie so brazenly? Determined to reclaim what was his, David began tearing through his desk drawers, searching for the original receipt for the grill. It had to be there. After what felt like an eternity, his hands closed around a folded piece of paper buried under a stack of bills. Unfolding it, he confirmed it was exactly what he needed. The purchase receipt, complete with the serial number and details of his transaction. Relief and vindication surged through him. Now he had the proof to expose Roger's deceit. Tomorrow he would confront his neighbor again, this time armed with undeniable evidence. The next morning, David woke up feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Armed with the receipt proving he owned the barbecue, he was ready to face Roger and settle the matter once and for all. However, as he opened his mailbox, his confidence took a devastating blow. Among the usual assortment of bills and advertisements was an official-looking envelope. Inside was a notification that Roger had filed a defamation lawsuit against him. David's hands trembled as he read the accusations. Roger claimed that David's public confrontation at the party had damaged his reputation and caused emotional distress. The language was sharp and pointed, painting David as an unstable neighbor with a vendetta. It was a direct attack, not only on his character, but on his credibility within the community. Shocked and overwhelmed, David immediately called a local attorney, Samantha Price, who specialized in property disputes and defamation cases. Within an hour, he was seated in her office, recounting the events that had led to this moment. Samantha listened carefully, taking notes as David explained his side of the story. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair and assessed the situation. "This is a classic offensive defense," she said. "Roger knows he's in the wrong, so he's trying to put you on the defensive by making you look like the aggressor. We'll fight this, but it won't be easy. Courts take defamation cases seriously, and we need to build an airtight counterargument." "What should I do?" David asked, his voice filled with determination. "We'll start by gathering every piece of evidence that proves you own the barbecue," Samantha replied. "The receipt is critical, but we'll need more than that. If we can show a pattern of deceit on Roger's part, it will strengthen your case. This means talking to neighbors, finding anyone who saw your barbecue at Roger's parties, and getting statements. We'll also contact the store where you purchased the grill to verify the transaction and serial number." David nodded, already formulating a plan. The following days were a whirlwind of preparation. He returned to the store where he had purchased the grill, presenting his receipt and explaining the situation to the manager. The manager confirmed the purchase in their records and provided a signed statement with the serial number of the grill, matching the details on David's receipt. Next, David began speaking with neighbors who had attended Roger's parties. Though some were reluctant to get involved, a few agreed to provide statements. They described the barbecue in vivid detail, commenting on its distinctive features, details that matched David's grill perfectly. Samantha helped David compile these statements alongside photos he had taken of the grill before it went missing. Each piece of evidence was meticulously organized into a file that grew thicker by the day. Meanwhile, Samantha drafted a legal response to Roger's defamation claim, arguing that David's confrontation had been based on a reasonable belief supported by evidence. "We'll also file a countersuit for property theft," she explained. "This will force Roger to defend his actions in court, where we'll have the chance to present our evidence." As the court date approached, David felt a mix of anxiety and determination. The stakes were high, not just for his reputation, but for his principles. He refused to let Roger's deceit tarnish his standing in the community or his sense of justice. On the morning of the trial, Samantha and David walked into the courtroom with their carefully prepared case. Across the room, Roger sat with his lawyer, exuding smug confidence. David's heart raced, but Samantha placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Trust the evidence," she said. What followed was a battle of narratives. Roger's attorney painted David as an irrational neighbor who had recklessly accused Roger without proof, damaging his social and personal standing. They presented Roger's forged receipt as evidence of his ownership, though its authenticity quickly came into question under cross-examination. Samantha then presented David's mountain of evidence: the original receipt, the store manager's verification, the detailed statements from neighbors, and even photos of the barbecue before it disappeared. Piece by piece, she dismantled Roger's credibility, revealing inconsistencies in his story and exposing the fraudulent nature of his claims. The turning point came when Samantha presented the store manager's signed statement, confirming the serial number of the grill. The judge scrutinized the evidence and Roger's demeanor, growing visibly skeptical of his defense. As the day drew to a close, the courtroom was silent, save for the sound of shuffling papers. David sat upright, hope flickering in his chest. The case wasn't over yet, but he felt the tide beginning to turn. When it was Roger's turn to testify, he repeated his claims with feigned sincerity. He insisted he had purchased the grill weeks prior and that David's confrontation had been baseless and malicious. However, under Samantha's cross-examination, his confidence began to crack. She pointed out discrepancies in the receipt he had provided, questioning why the store's official verification did not align with his version of events. Roger grew visibly flustered, offering vague and contradictory answers. Then came the testimonies from neighbors who had attended Roger's parties. One by one, they described the barbecue they had seen in Roger's backyard, a barbecue that matched David's grill in every distinctive detail. Some even mentioned the unique scuff marks and custom thermometer, features Roger could not explain. The more they spoke, the clearer it became that Roger's claims were unraveling. The turning point came when David presented a new piece of evidence. Days before the trial, while driving past a local junkyard, he had spotted something familiar among the discarded items. Pulling over, he had found his barbecue, partially damaged but unmistakable. The unique markings, the custom additions, and the serial number all matched the documentation he had provided. With the help of the junkyard owner, he had secured a statement confirming when and how the barbecue had been dumped by none other than Roger. As this new evidence was presented in court, Roger's composure disintegrated. Samantha meticulously connected the dots, showing that Roger had attempted to dispose of the barbecue to cover his tracks, knowing the case was slipping out of his control. The judge, visibly unimpressed with Roger's antics, scrutinized the evidence with care before calling for closing arguments. In her final statement, Samantha painted a clear picture. Roger's actions were not just deceitful, but deliberate and malicious, aimed at stealing David's property and silencing him through legal intimidation. She urged the court to recognize the weight of the evidence and deliver justice. The judge's decision was swift and decisive. The barbecue was officially declared David's property, and Roger was found guilty of defamation, forgery, and theft. In addition to hefty fines, he was ordered to pay David significant compensation for emotional distress and legal costs. As the verdict was read, David felt a wave of relief and vindication wash over him. Justice had prevailed, and Roger's attempts to undermine him had failed spectacularly. Roger, on the other hand, slumped in his seat, his once smug demeanor replaced with visible humiliation. Roger's fall from grace was swift and public. The courtroom victory had done more than just return David's barbecue. It had exposed Roger's deceit to the entire neighborhood. Word spread quickly about the court's findings, and Roger's once polished image was tarnished beyond repair. Neighbors who had once attended Roger's parties now avoided him entirely, muttering about his betrayal and arrogance. The friendly nods and waves he had previously enjoyed were replaced with cold stares and whispers. Children giggled behind his back, calling him the barbecue thief, while adults shook their heads in disapproval. It wasn't long before Roger's embarrassment became too much to bear. He listed his house for sale and quietly moved out of the neighborhood, leaving behind a legacy of dishonor. Meanwhile, David emerged as the true victor, not just legally, but socially. The compensation he received from Roger covered the cost of a new, even more impressive barbecue. This one was state-of-the-art, complete with every feature a grill master could dream of. Its arrival marked a new chapter, one David was determined to celebrate in style. Invitations went out to every household in the neighborhood. David's backyard was transformed into a festive paradise, with string lights, music, and tables laden with food. The barbecue was the star of the evening, sizzling with mouth-watering steaks, ribs, and vegetables. Neighbors gathered, chatting and laughing as they enjoyed the hospitality that had always been David's hallmark. One after another, they approached him to commend his perseverance and integrity. "You stood your ground," one neighbor said, raising a glass, "and now we all get to enjoy the best barbecue in town." As the evening stretched on, the atmosphere grew warmer, more celebratory. For David, the event was more than just a party. It was a chance to rebuild connections and reaffirm his place in the community. By the end of the night, it was clear he had succeeded. David's reputation as a kind and steadfast neighbor was stronger than ever, while Roger's betrayal became nothing more than a cautionary tale of greed and dishonesty. In the weeks that followed the neighborhood barbecue, life returned to a peaceful rhythm for David. His new grill became a cherished centerpiece of many joyful gatherings, and his backyard was once again filled with the laughter of friends and family. Each weekend brought a fresh opportunity to cook, connect, and strengthen the bonds he had worked so hard to rebuild. David's resilience and integrity left a lasting impression on his neighbors. They admired how he had stood firm against deception and fought for what was right without losing sight of his values. Conversations about trust and accountability became common in the community, with many reflecting on the importance of supporting one another in times of conflict. The neighborhood also came away with a renewed sense of camaraderie. People began to look out for one another more actively, sharing tips, offering help, and ensuring everyone felt included. The incident with Roger served as a powerful reminder of the strength found in honesty and unity, leaving the community stronger and more connected than ever before. For David, it was a lesson in perseverance. His unwavering commitment to truth not only reclaimed his property, but also restored his relationships and solidified his role as a valued member of the neighborhood.